creator for the nationwide eclipse ballooning project. And we're very happy today to have Dr. Michael Kirk, who is another PI of another science activation program. So if you haven't heard of that before, right, we're a NASA-sponsored program within the Science Mission Directorate of NASA in a program called Science Activation. And we have a few other related projects that are working on eclipse activities. And Michael's project is one of those, although what he does is not specifically just aimed at eclipses, but he's the PI of the heliophysics, it's called HEAT, the Heliophysics Education Activation Team. So he leads that out of Goddard Space Flight Center, our NASA headquarters. And so Michael has been doing solar physics related things for a long time. He got his PhD at New Mexico State University, where he was working on things in an area of the sun's atmosphere called the chromosphere. And I'm actually going to let him talk a little bit more about his background. Michael, if you're good with that, we'd love to hear a little bit about how you got interested in what you're doing now, and just a little bit about how you got into your career so that the students can hear about that, and then love to hear about what you want to share with us today. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me here to talk to this group. I'm very excited to. This is a fun group of people to talk to, not only because of the science that you're doing now, but the science that you're going to be doing in your careers. And that's really exciting to me. So I'm going to flip what Angela just said on its head. I'm going to talk about projects first and then career second, because what I want to do is let enough time at the end, leave enough time at the end so that you can ask questions and we can actually have a little bit of a dialogue, because what I'm hoping to do is kind of walk you through some of what it looks like to be on this side of things rather than where you're sitting, which is, hey, maybe I want a career in science. How do I get there? And so we'll talk about that. But first, let's talk a little bit about eclipses through the eyes of NASA. So all of you are centered at a very cool spot. And I wanted to give you a sense of how cool it is initially, talk a little bit about what NASA is doing for the eclipse other than the Eclipse Ballooning Project and some of the education efforts, and then make sure that you have the skills and know where to find materials to be able to engage your communities. And when I say communities, I'm using that in the most broad sense. By communities, I mean if you have a sibling or a grandmother or an aunt or a neighbor, and you want to talk to them about NASA and about the eclipse, about your role and about what you can do, that you have the materials to be able to speak to them and do some direct outreach that way. Lastly, I'll talk a little bit about other research projects that I'm still involved in, and then we'll do some career stuff. So first, solar eclipses. I'm sure all of you know exactly what a solar eclipse is. That's not why I'm showing you this graphic, although it's cool. I mean, it's good to remind you of like exactly where the shadows are and all of that. But why I'm showing you this animation is because whenever you see an animation like this, you always get a sense of like, oh, here's the eclipse. You know, you got the sun, you got the moon, you got the earth, the shadow. But nobody actually ends up showing it to you at scale. So this is an animation from NASA that shows you what it looks like if you actually scale it out to a 1-to-1 ratio between distance and size of the moon and Earth. And you can see why we make the diagrams like this. Because if you take it all the way out to scale, let's play that one more time, you end up losing all sorts of perspective. And the reason why I really wanted to talk a little bit about this is we were just having a debate on my team on why do we use diagrams like this and what misconceptions can be portrayed. And science misconceptions are really slippery things. They can get into your head, even if you're trying to be careful, you're trying to be accurate and say things very, very carefully. And scales and positions of things are easy to misrepresent. And so it's easy to see that first diagram and say, oh, the moon is just a few times bigger than the Earth, or I'm sorry, the sun's just a few times bigger than the Earth, and the moon is about the same size of the Earth. It's about the same. Not true at all. And so when we scale everything out to where things fit together, it gives you a different perspective. And it's important to keep that sort of in the back of your head as you talk to people, because those misconceptions just sort of creep in. And we just had to redo an entire graphic that we were putting out because of these misconceptions of scaling and size and distance. So, up next, we have the path of totality. Okay, a lot of you are going to be scattered along this path of totality, but I wanted to also just drive home. This is the NASA map of the eclipse coming up, the total eclipse. And you can see the path of totality there, and the purple rings that go from Mexico all the way up through Maine and into Canada. But I wanted to drive home the point that the path of totality is one place, but we're actually going to see not only some sort of coverage through the entire continental US, but if you look at that little globe insert in the corner, you can see that almost all of Canada as well is going to see some partiality, and all of Mexico and a good part of Central America and the Caribbean. So this again, it's one of those misconceptions that's easy to get locked into your brain, especially coming from NASA, talking from a point where you're a student in the U.S. and you're working on this project, and it's the National Eclipse Ballooning Project. It's easy to get a very U.S.-centric view on the eclipse, but the eclipses they don't care about nations, of course, and they will stretch far and wide. And so the eclipses have these major impacts on communities all across North America. And it's really a North American phenomenon. Oftentimes at NASA, we end up focusing on the United States because of, budget priorities and all of that. But again, it's one of those misconceptions that's easy to kind of get yourself slipped into without really realizing it, that the eclipse has these impacts nationwide and internationally. And so it's a great way to build these bonds with people from other countries and other backgrounds because of this commonality that's shared across borders and really across nations and across disciplines. So these sorts of features are a great asset for an eclipse. It's about having this one central phenomenon that we can all drive to, a time and a place to look at it, a very special place in the world where we can drive towards this in terms of like physically get in your car and drive, but also strive for being at a specific time and a place to observe this phenomenon. And it's really unifying across not only demographics, but also countries and internationally. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to drive home was how cool of a project you're participating in. I'm sure that you have had a really great experience working with new technologies, understanding about weather balloons, ionosounds, learning a little bit about atmospheric physics, learning about technologies and how they all stick together. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about how special this is. Okay, so eclipses occur on the Earth total eclipses about once every 18 months, somewhere on the planet. As you might remember, the planet is covered almost entirely with water, over 70% with water. So most of the time, eclipses occur over water, which makes it difficult to get to and often inaccessible entirely. So if you wanted to get an eclipse in any one place in the world, you'd have to sit and wait for about between 350 and 400 years for it to cross. There are exceptions about this, of course, like if you're in Southern Illinois, like you got the eclipse, total eclipse in 2017, you're going to see it again in 2024. This is broad statistics, but if you were to just go out to your backyard, sit down and wait, you'd be waiting for many human lifetimes in order to see a total solar eclipse. So these things are rare in any one location and are special. This is against, lunar eclipses. Lunar eclipses can happen a few times a year. They are seen from the entire nighttime sky. And so lunar eclipses are something where it's worth going out and observing them, but doesn't quite have that exclusivity of a total eclipse. And it doesn't have that sort of presence of being in a time and a space. So the next total solar eclipse after 2024 in the lower 48 is in August 2044. That's only Montana and North Dakota are going to see that. If you want to see another total eclipse in the US in general, Alaska will see totality on the north slope of Alaska in 2033. So we're talking about 9 or 20 years into the future before the United States is going to be able to observe another total solar eclipse. So the project that you're participating in is incredibly special because we have this opportunity to use the United States resources like the freeway network and the highway network to get all across the path of totality, as well as a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from research institutions, universities, NASA, NOAA, NSF, all driving together to make this the best observed eclipse ever. It's incredible what we're up to. So NASA priorities for 2024 really are sixfold. First of all, safety. We can't push on that hard enough. We want everybody to be safe. If you never look directly at the sun. Only use I would say never look directly at the sun with a nice little asterisk by it, which is until you're in totality, and then please look directly at the sun until it's not totality, and then put your solar eclipse glasses on. So solar eclipse glasses, solar viewing filters are essential. If not, again, when you go out and talk to your community members, when you talk to other students, when you talk to your neighbors or family, if they don't have eclipse glasses, it's okay. You can still participate in the eclipse and you can still have a good viewing experience using pinhole projecting or just a small pinhole in anything that you have, and you can see a nice eclipse crescent. And this is an important message because a lot of people have this sort of eclipse glasses anxiety. If they don't have them on you have eclipse glasses, they feel like they need to avoid the eclipse or they can't observe it or they're missing out. And that's not true. You can definitely observe the eclipse using pinhole or indirect viewing methods. Secondly, broadening participation. We're wanting to get the message out about the eclipse being an exciting and dynamic event to everybody. So that means that we're looking for people to engage their communities where they are. And so if you are in different social groups, or if you are talking to different groups of people, it's worth mentioning the eclipse. I was in Boulder, Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and I was at a restaurant, and the waiter, just asking me what I was doing there, and I was explaining that I was working for NASA, but I said, there's an eclipse coming up. It's like, oh, really? And that simple action, it really is the best way to start connecting with people, and we can all do it. It's not just something you have to be a funded NASA scientist to do that. You can do that too, and we're encouraging everybody to go out and engage their community. Science, of course, you're engaged in a key part of that science, but also beyond that, NASA has several other programs that we'll get into in a second. Public engagement is a huge piece because this is not just about the engaging your community and observing the eclipse, but also making sure that people feel that that they can come together surrounding this. There's been a lot that's happened in the world in the last few years, and that's certainly not lost to us at NASA. And we want to really recognize the fact that eclipses can bring people together, and they do. It's a moment in time where we can all take some time out from our regular day to come together and view this natural phenomenon. Last two, science activation, which is the education part of it. That's part of my program of working on, and then citizen science, which is something that I think all of you are very familiar with. So, key messaging around the eclipse. These are really what NASA is looking to communicate about the eclipse. So you can use these as topics when you talk to anybody and everybody. So observing our star, the sun, can be safe and inspirational. That's it. It's a safe environment to exist in, to view the eclipse. You can get deeply inspired. If you've not seen a total solar eclipse yet, I certainly hope you can see totality this time. Clouds are going to be a factor, but I hope you can, because it is deeply impactful People, have done art for millennia on these. They have carved this into stone because seeing a total solar eclipse is incredibly impactful. So taking the time to recognize that observing the sun is not any more dangerous than walking out to on a sunny day. Don't stare at the sun if it's not covered up completely. And it can really inspire you on how you think about your life and think about your role in the universe or your relationship to the universe. So experiencing eclipse is one way that everybody can participate in NASA science. And participate in NASA science has many different views. I mean, if you're out with a balloon team and you're launching a balloon the day of the eclipse, that is one way. Another way is if you have friends or family at home that are unable to travel for the eclipse, they can watch it on NASA TV, or they can go out and use pinhole projecting, or they can do activities. So this way, it's really trying to expand the message beyond just you need to drive to totality, and if you're not doing science, then you're just a spectator. But everybody can get involved and get excited about NASA science beyond those who are just participating in it directly. So the last of NASA's messaging is about connecting the sun to the Earth. Exploring our sun and interaction with Earth is possible through innovative NASA missions. This is a NASA mission diagram in the background. Of course, NASA missions are beyond just these satellites that are flying. There are sounding rockets that are launched. There are high altitude balloons, of course, and all of these come together to form a more complete picture of that sun-Earth relationship. How does the sun impact the Earth, and why do we study the sun? What is the meaning behind it? And really the reason is that the sun defines our home. The living in a solar system means that the sun has a key role in not only our life here on Earth, but likely how life formed. The reason life formed, there's a working theory out there, is because we had solar activity. And without an active star, that wouldn't happen. So the sun-Earth relationship is baked into who we are as humans and baked into Earth. And understanding that is not only interesting from a sociological, how does the sun affect us, but it's also a fundamental physics laboratory, understanding those fundamental physics processes that cause the sun to behave the way it does. All right, so I need to touch on safety. This is a required segment for myself. We have to do it. So I'm just going to go over it quickly. I'm likely you have heard these things before, but eclipse glasses, make sure that when you have eclipse glasses or some sort of solar filter, if you're viewing the sun directly, also give those glasses a visual inspection. Just make sure that they're not, broken, crinkled, there's a hole in them, or you haven't stuffed them in the back pocket and they've gotten damaged. So just use some common sense in terms of if the glasses look damaged, just throw them out and find another pair. It's better to not have a pair than risk some eye damage. Also, if you are going to use any sort of magnifying anything for the eclipse, and I'm talking about binoculars or a phone lens or anything that magnifies the sun to take pictures of the eclipse, make sure that the eclipse filter is the first thing between the sun and whatever else is next. So it's the sun, filter, and then other stuff. So again, that's to protect yourself or protect electronics. If you have a cell phone and you want to take a picture, to make sure that your cell phone is protected and isn't going to overexpose the optics and potentially damage the electronics as well. Also, indirect viewing methods, it's cool. I mean, it's actually a really fun way of doing it. Get creative with it. Make a bunch of pinholes and make designs out of them and then project those crescents onto the ground. I do remember my first eclipse experience. I don't remember how old I was exactly, but I was in summer daycare, so probably early grade school, and we did put the cereal box on our head and saw a partial eclipse, and I thought, man, that's really lame. It's a distinct memory in my brain, so it doesn't have to be lame. You can have fun with pinhole projector. Just remember not to look through the pinhole at the sun. It's to project the sun's image on the ground itself. Indirect viewing methods can also be, a technological project. We have a 3D printing or a 3D a project for a 3D printer where you can print out the shape of the United States. That's for the annular eclipse. We have them updated for the total eclipse. If you're interested, you can go to this resource. We've developed these 3D printing models for the total eclipse, and you can print one out and create a little science experiment looking at the the different shapes of the holes and what sort of lens that they create in for the pinhole viewer, or how far away from the ground do you need to be in order to focus this? This is in effect a camera obscura. It's a basic form of camera. You can make it a little project, and if you have access to a 3D printer, this is a fun way to do it. All right, let's get into a little bit of the science that's happening for the eclipse. All right, so NASA's launching sounding rockets. These sounding rockets are suborbital, so they're like, if you've ever launched a model rocket or seen like one of those SD's model rockets go up, it's like that, except maybe 10 times bigger, maybe 15 times bigger. So they launch from a launch pad, or they're launching from a launch pad in Virginia and on Wallops Island. They are going to launch before the eclipse, during the eclipse, and after. And these are going to actually go up, fly up through the ionosphere and come back down again. And so they're going to be taking measurements of atmospheric conditions, temperature, density, how much current there is, other aspects, all the way through its flight. And so it's a suborbital. It's going to come up and come back down in, I want to say, I think the whole flight is like 15 to 20 minutes from launch to coming, not even, it's less than that. It's like 10 minutes to coming up and coming down. So it's a fast experience. It's really neat, but they're going to be able to get a lot of great data that's going to complement your own science that you're going to do for that. So they're looking at ionospheric effects, primarily understanding how the ionosphere changes during a total solar eclipse. In addition, NASA is going to be flying a WB-57. So this is a high-flying aircraft. You can see it in the background there with cameras on board that are going to take pictures of the eclipse in a brand new way. So these cameras are specially designed to take pictures in the infrared, so beyond the visual spectrum and the near infrared, and be able to look at polarization states of the solar corona. The reason why you have to stick it on an airplane is because of atmospheric moisture. So there are clouds, there's lots of moisture in our atmosphere, and viewing the infrared is nearly impossible in all of those wavelengths because of the atmospheric water vapor blocking it. So getting up to about 60,000 feet, you can actually start to view the sun in literally a new light. So they're going to be looking for a dust ring around the star, or around the sun, and asteroids that could possibly exist as well. They're going to be flying spectrometers and looking for how the solar corona transmits energy from the surface of the sun out into the solar corona. This is addressing one of the age-old, or partially addressing one of the age-old problems, which is, why does the outer atmosphere of the sun hotter than the surface of the sun? It's a weird one. The outer atmosphere is a few million degrees. The surface of the sun is 5,000 degrees, 6,000 degrees. That's bizarre. Why is that? It's like you have a campfire, and as you walk away from it, it gets hotter. Not what you would expect intuitively. There are a lot of different theories on what's going on there, and this will help address some of them. In addition, there are some really cool projects with citizen scientists. There's a listening party for amateur radio operators. If you know anybody who's a ham radio operator, this will also probe the underside of the ionosphere by using connections between ham radio operators, and be able to map the underside of the ionosphere and gravity waves and the way those waves change with the eclipse. In addition, Super Darn radio receivers are going to be looking at ionospheric effects as well. And then one of the coolest programs that I think it's just a really fun one, the Goldstone Apple Valley Radio Telescope. This is a giant 34-meter dish radio telescope, is going to be looking at the sun and using the moon as an occulter. So it's going to be using the natural progression of the moon covering up the sun to get super high resolution images of solar active regions. So these are the regions in the sun that causes flares and eruptions. And by using the motion of the moon in a clever way, they're going to be able to get higher resolution images of these active regions than ever before. It's a really fun one. So I'm looking forward to seeing the science coming out of that. All right. NASA will be hosting many different community events across the path. We're lovingly calling these NASA sunspots. We're going to be really across the path from Texas all the way up to Maine, and we'll be hosting public events. So if you are in the area, or if you have family in the area and you want to participate, come and hang out with NASA for the eclipse. These are the cities to go to. We're going to be doing dozens of exhibits and other events along on the path and outside the path. So likely there will be some sort of NASA event near where you live. So you don't have to travel in order to do it. I know that a lot of you will be traveling, which is awesome, but you don't have to travel if you can't travel, or you're not able to travel for the eclipse. NASA will be out nationwide doing engagement events. Oh yeah, by the way, go to nasa.gov/eclipse to find details on all these events. All right, the main Eclipse webpage. This is a great resource for all of you to find, to point people to if people are asking, how do I know more about the eclipse? How do I stay up to date on this? Science.nasa.gov/eclipses, they have some fantastic resources on this website. These are a lot of products that my program has put together and put out the door, including high resolution images of that NASA eclipse map. You can download super high resolution images, print them out for yourself, make souvenirs, use them as wrapping paper, put them on t-shirts. They're all free and open to use, so download them as you'd like. In addition, we have safety flyers in English and Spanish. We're getting translations. I'll talk about the translations on the next page, so that if you are engaging communities that are not English speaking or don't have English as a primary language, we're trying to support that as well. We're not able to translate to every language, but I'll talk about the languages in a second. In addition, we have posters. Those are two examples of posters. There are other posters on there. Again, these are free for you to print and replicate as many times as you want. You can, get them on mugs or T-shirts or whatever you'd like to do. These are open source and ready for you to download and use as you'd like. So translations, right? So NASA en Español is the major source for Spanish language content. There'll be a live stream of NASA's Spanish language broadcast during the eclipse totality. So yeah, for about an hour, they'll be doing live interviews and covering the eclipse completely in Spanish. The Exploratorium is the NASA's partner on that. They'll be co-hosting a Spanish language broadcast. In addition, those materials, including the safety flyer, informational poster, pinhole camera video, and information about the 2024 map, are going to be translated into the languages you see there: Arabic, Chinese, Korean, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and French. So that's beyond the Spanish language translations, which there's a lot more. So if you are in a community of people that don't speak English, there's a great way that you can distribute the materials in those languages. These languages are identified, the U.S. Census identified as the most common languages for people to speak that don't speak English or Spanish at home. So that's what we're going forward with. I think those are coming up online. If they're not up today, they should be up next week. So if those resources are of interest for you and you don't see them, check back on the NASA Eclipse website soon. Also, we are looking to engage a broad audience in multiple different ways. So, for example, the Eclipse Soundscapes app is looking to bring people in as citizen scientists as well as researchers, and give them images of the sun that have a rumble map feature to them. And so you can literally feel the sun. So if you are blind or have low vision, you can still experience the sun and the eclipse using the Eclipse Soundscape app. We also are partnering with Servi, SSERVI.nasa.gov, to produce Braille books. So we're looking to reach out to blind and low vision communities and have shipped out over 1,000 of them across the country to reach people who are blind and low vision. In addition, we're working to talk with people who have different cultural perspectives. So specifically with the Exploratorium and the Indigenous Education Institute, we came up with a poster in Navajo talking about eclipses. And that's a sensitive subject because in traditional Navajo culture, you're not able to view an eclipse. You're not supposed to be outside. You're not supposed to view it. And this poster talks about the traditional understanding and the traditional knowledge behind that, so that people can still understand the eclipse. They can still participate in the eclipse, even if they're not viewing it directly with glasses or otherwise. Next, if you have a need to do educator or your education resources, so I don't know, maybe you know somebody who's a teacher and they want to teach about the eclipse, or you yourself want to go through and learn a little bit more about maybe the mathematics behind predicting eclipses or some of the other aspects, more classroom aspects of the eclipse. My NASA Data and Heat teamed up to create this whole environment about the eclipses, and you can dive into it. It's a Google Classroom environment, so you can go in there and take lessons as you would like, or they are aligned to curriculum standards. So if you know teachers that are teaching grades 5 through 12 and are wanting to know more about the eclipses, this is a great way for them to get them into their classrooms as well. Next, we are releasing Eclipse training materials. So this is going to be a training material that we're releasing to NASA employees. We're developing it for NASA employees, but we're letting everybody else have it too. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I've gone through some training. I kind of know what an eclipse is. Why would I need this? Well, this is over 120 PowerPoint slides of eclipse amazingness. So if you want to be able to make a presentation to peers or to any sort of audience, this will have a tremendous number of resources that you can pull from for your eclipse presentations. We should be, it said early February. It's now early February. I think it should be out midweek next week. We're just doing the final edits, and Oregon State University is going to be hosting that for us. And there's a short survey at the front, so to just understand its impact. So if you have a need to do any sort of eclipse presentations at all, this is just a giant treasure trove of resources that you can talk about citizen science or NASA science or outreach or the broadening participation or cool animations or videos, all of it. It's just all in one resource, and you can go and download it. Again, check back on the NASA Eclipse site resources. You should be able to find a link there. Also, if you want updates on everything that NASA is doing for the eclipse, subscribe to the NASA newsletter. This newsletter has been coming out once a month. I think as we get closer to the eclipse, we're like 60 days away, 59 days away, something like that. This will start coming out a little bit more frequently and keeping you up to date on all the latest stuff, all the really cool stuff that we're putting out. It was just released earlier today, so I didn't get a chance to put it in my slide deck, but we've been pairing with Neptune Studios, Minute Earth or Minute Physics, to produce eclipse videos. So if you want to go to YouTube, look up Minute Earth. There is a brand new eclipse videos about how eclipses affect animals. I encourage you to check it out. They're really fun. They're like 3 or 4 minutes long, really super interesting topics. So this is all part of a bigger effort by NASA called the Heliophysics Big Year. So this eclipse effort is just one of 3 pieces to round out the big year. So eclipses are part of it. Then bringing citizen science into it, the activities that you're doing is another big part. Citizen science is a major part of this big initiative. And then science missions and engagement is the third part. So bringing eclipses, NASA missions, and citizen science efforts together is what NASA's calling the Heliophysics Big Year. And this big year is a big year. It starts in October. Started last October with the annular eclipse, and then there are monthly themes that walk through the rest of the year. Of course, with the total eclipse in April, but then it culminates with Parker Solar Probe's perihelion, where it's the humanity's closest approach to the sun. The Parker Solar Probe is going to be, descending into the upper solar atmosphere and taking measurements, brand new measurements of how that upper solar atmosphere, the corona, is behaving. Every month has a theme. February's theme is fashion. I don't feel very fashionable, but I'm sure that there's some really good connections between eclipses and fashion, or the sun and fashion. In fact, what you choose to wear every day is often dictated about how sunny it is and how hot the sun is. So, even in minor ways, the sun can impact us. So next month is experiencing the sun, and there are many different ways coming up. So stay tuned for NASA Communications for really fun activities for the rest of the calendar year 2024. And I'm very curious to know what bonus science is. I don't even know what that is, but I like bonus science, at least the sound of it. So I'm excited to hear what we have in store for that. All right, so I'm going to pivot just a little bit and talk about things that are not the eclipse, because I'm tired of the eclipse. I mean, yes and no. Like, I'm really excited to see it, but it's exhausting. It's a lot of work. So here are some other projects that I've been working on, that I wanted to just tell you about and show you that, I have more sides to me than just an eclipse robot. So one of the missions that I'm really excited about that's coming up is the Sunset mission, the Sun Coronal Ejection Tracker. This is the mission poster that was designed. This is a CubeSat. So it's a 6-use CubeSat. So it's about yay big. It's a large shoebox size kind of satellite. And it's going to be launching in early 2025, and it's going to be taking new and interesting pictures of the sun. We're going to be tracking coronal mass ejections, these eruptions from the surface of the sun, in a way that that haven't been traditionally accessible. So traditionally, there's been the inner circle is one instrument that has been launched. And then the outer circle shows the coronagraph of where you make an artificial eclipse, and you can observe these coronal mass ejections coming off. What we're doing is we're creating an instrument, an imager, that is actually being able to take a picture of the entire sun and outer atmosphere dynamically, where we expose the sun very shortly, and then we do deep exposures further out, further away from the sun, so that we can see both the surface of the sun and these eruptions coming off. It's about 1,000,000 times dimmer. The eruptions are about 1,000,000 times dimmer than the surface of the sun. So it's a new technological challenge, but using modern sensors, the CMOS sensors that you find in any sort of modern camera, you can do this sort of fun way of dynamically imaging the sun. So this is a synthetic observation. I am helping write the software to process all the images for the actual data. So that's coming up. Stay tuned for that, and I guess we would probably be mid-2025 when you can see some images. In addition, one thing that I've been working on for a while is this idea of how do you take data science and bridge it together with heliophysics, with studying the sun. So working at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, we've come up with this idea of helioanalytics. It's a new term that we've coined, where we're trying to bridge the idea of analysis and data science, using machine learning, artificial intelligence, with doing discovery science. So this is an ongoing effort, but something that I've continued to be interested in is that intersection of how do we use these modern computing methods to do real discovery science on the sun. We have a ton of data, and it's a very interesting environment. But how we actually use those brand new algorithms like ChatGPT, like large language models or foundational models, how do we actually incorporate them into heliophysics is an active area of research. So we're still working on it. There's a lot of pilot projects, and I'd be happy to talk about some more of them. But in the interest of time, I'll get to a little bit of the demographics. So finally answering Angela's original question, How did I get to NASA? All right, so I grew up in McMinnville, Oregon, small town south of Portland, Oregon, about 20,000 people when I was there. Went to undergraduate at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, small liberal arts school. Then went to at Goddard Space Flight Center, wrote some software there, and then went to New Mexico State University, did a master's and PhD, came back to Goddard as a NASA postdoc, then fell off of the postdoc on into at Catholic University, where I was a research scientist there, moved to commercial space with Open Space, Orion Space Solutions in Louisville, Colorado, and then finally have come back to Goddard as a research scientist. That is the way my LinkedIn profile or resume would read. It's not wrong. It's just not really the full story, right? So yeah, there's some highlights there, where I went to school, jobs, all of that. What's kind of left out is like what all of those arrows actually encompass. So those arrows are actually significant, and I just wanted to take a moment to talk about how, this sort of perception of a career path, although it's not inaccurate, it's not nearly the full story. Okay, so graduating from McMinnville, Oregon, I graduated from McMinnville High School. I applied to 10 different colleges. I got into two. One of them was the Oregon State University, the state school, and I really didn't want to go there because everybody else from high school was going there. Whitman College was the only other school I got into, so that's where I went. It's not like I had a career plan or it's like this is where I was gonna go and that's it. It was the only other school except unless I wanted to go to Oregon State. And it was in sort of an arrogant decision not to go to the state school because Oregon State has great science. So happy I went there. It was a fun experience. But then I didn't know what I was doing when I graduated. I moved home. I moved home with my parents. I lived at home. I worked as a caterer. And then I started doing landscaping. And I blasted my resume out to everybody I knew. And 6 months went by, and 9 months went by. And I was like, I just couldn't stand it. So I literally got in the car and drove across the country. I was just like, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I was driving across the country, and I was in Tennessee about a day away from arriving in Washington, D.C., where my sister was living. Um, and I got a call from Goddard Space Flight Center saying, "Hey, we got your resume on our desk. Would you like to come in for an interview?" I was like, yeah, yeah, of course. I could be there in 6 hours. So I don't know how, to this day, I don't really know how my resume got to Goddard. I just was sending it out to everybody and was getting nothing, but somebody sent it to somebody else and recommended me for this project. So I got there and I wrote software for the Solar Dynamics Observatory mission, some analysis software. And I was there and I was pretty happy. That was a pretty awesome job. I was feeling really good about myself. I had like an actual salary. I was living in Washington, D.C. I had my own apartment. And my supervisor, Dean Pesnell, who's the project scientist for SDO, said, "Hey, you're good at this. You should go to graduate school." I was like, "Yeah, I'll think about that." And then another few months went by. He says, "No, I'm serious. I'm going to actually cut the funding to your project. You should go to graduate school." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so then I applied to graduate schools. I got into two graduate schools. I applied to 10. I got into two. New Mexico State University was the only one that actually gave me funding to go to graduate school. So I ended up there. Did I expect to end up in New Mexico? No. But I also had a really good time there. I learned a lot and it's a fantastic program. It's one that if you're interested in a PhD in astronomy, I'd actually recommend it. Coming out of New Mexico State, coming into New Mexico State, I didn't think I wanted to study the sun at all. I wanted to study galaxies or maybe dark matter, something like that. Well, the conditions of me getting paid as a graduate student was I had to do solar physics research. So that's how we got started with it. Not some grand design. It was just they paid me. So I said, okay. But I also fell in love with the project then. I really got a lot of great feeling out of being involved in something that was fundamentally interesting, but also had a substantial amount of a real world applicability so that space weather does affect us here on the ground and understanding the sun does really impact our future. So that really gave me a lot of passion, and I wanted to continue with it. The NASA postdoctoral program, that was a neat step, but that was because I knew the people at Goddard from when I was there writing software and had those connections to go back. And so I already knew who was there, and I was able to use those in order to move into the postdoctoral program. So that kind of relationship really was what drove it. I mean, I was a reasonable student, don't get me wrong. Like I work hard and I do reasonable research, but I'm not the world's best scientist. I can guarantee you that one. I'm probably not even, well, I can also guarantee I'm not even my generation's, like my graduating class's best scientist. I'm not. But how I moved into NASA was relationships, was because of the people that I knew the first time I was at Goddard. So then moving on to Catholic University, again, that was sort of just, there wasn't any other options. If I wanted to continue working at NASA, there wasn't an option to be a postdoc. So I joined Catholic University, which had some contracts with NASA. Orion Space was an opportunity that I wanted to get outside of the NASA bubble and expand my wings a little bit. So I went to commercial space, which was really fun, but it's a different environment and it's a lot more pressure in some ways. So when the opportunity came back to be a research scientist at NASA, I took it. So those arrows encode a lot of things that aren't encoded in just those highlights. So even though the path looks straight, I didn't know where I was going most of the time. I had hopes, I had dreams, but I didn't know what the next step was exactly. So you may be asking yourself now or sometime in the future, should I go to graduate school? Is that something I should do? Is that something I want to do? Or maybe you are a master's degree student and you're thinking, maybe should I get a PhD? So I would say if you can answer yes to the three P's, then yes, you should go to graduate school, which is, do you have passion for what you're doing? Do you get up in the morning and you just are really excited about it? Does that make you want to ask more questions? Do you have persistence? Being in a PhD program, it kind of doesn't matter what discipline it is. Um, it means you have to have a lot of persistence to see these independent projects through. You are becoming the world's expert in some tiny subdiscipline of a topic, and having that persistence to drive through it is an essential component. And lastly, is it paid for? If you are going into a master's or PhD program in science, you should have a package from whatever program that you're accepted to pay for your a stipend for doing a graduate research or teaching assisting. You need to have that. If they're not offering you something, I would really think twice about that program, even if it's the best program, even if you're accepted into Michigan or Harvard or Caltech. Think about if they're not covering it, it's probably not worth going there. I mean, there's a couple of caveats, but yeah, I wouldn't go. So, should you go to graduate school? If you have a passion for the topic, if you have that persistence to see those programs through, and if your program is paid for, then yeah, you should go to graduate school. So, last but not least, I just wanted to say a couple of things about good advice that I got from some people and some things I wish people had told me before I went to grad school when I was thinking about this life. So, first of all, the GRE, so general GRE is okay. This is the graduate something exam, graduate requirement exam. I forget what GRE stands for, but it's the exam that a lot of programs require. The GRE general ones, it's okay. It's a test. It's not a whole lot different than other standardized tests you may have taken. The subject GRE, that's not great. The physics one is rough. Most people get below 50% on that test. So that's a tough one. If you are thinking about going into a physics or your program requires the physics GRE, study for it, work on it. But if you get a lousy score, like I did, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. In grad school, grades really don't matter. You just pass or you don't pass. Yes, they'll give you a grade, but pass your classes. It's not worth stressing out on whether you got a B or an A in a course. Nobody cares. They don't. You probably are, very hard workers in your undergraduate classes, making sure that you getting those A's and wanting to make sure you turn in the good work. Yes, but in graduate school, your job is to become an independent researcher as a PhD. That's your job. Getting an A or a B based on your professor's evaluation, that's second. That's making sure that you understand the topics. But your job is to become an independent researcher. And so that's really what's important. It's worth sacrificing the grade on an exam, getting a B on an exam if you have the opportunity to do more research or more innovative research. That's the trade-off you should be making. Engineering paths, if you want to go into engineering, that's fantastic. You probably don't need a PhD unless you want to teach. A master's degree is entirely sufficient for almost all engineering jobs in the professional world. It's better to get the experience, go through with a master's degree, get the experience than doing an engineering PhD. With a caveat, if you want to teach at a university, then yeah, you need a PhD. Internships are great. They're fantastic to have. It's not the only path. I trying to remember. I don't think I had one. Oh, no, I take that back. I've had a couple of formal internships. Almost everything I've done in internships have been informal. It's somebody that had some work that needed to be done and paid me for it. The summer research internships I applied for, I just never got. So there are certainly other paths, but internships are a great way to get to form those relationships. Last but not least, mental health is incredibly important. Take care of your mental health. And I say this with all sincerity that graduate school will test your mental health, period. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much education, how smart, how great you are at doing it. There will be a point in grad school where you are really struggling. So maintain it. Don't let yourself get too far out of whack because it's really important and undersaid, frankly. People need to recognize that mental health is an important component for maintaining or for surviving graduate school. Last but not least, the only genuine advice I have for anybody is, have integrity, say what you do what you say, and be kind to people. The only reason I'm where I am in my career is the people that have helped me out along the way. And the reason they've helped me out is because, I've kept those two things centered, to recognize that I have obligations to people and fulfill them and be kind. So that's what I would recommend. You never know who you're going to meet and how it's going to help you out later in life. So just keep those centered. So I think that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time. There's a little bit of time for questions, I think. You can also reach out to me at michael.s.kirk@nasa.gov.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Wonderful. So yeah, we'll open it up for questions. If anyone has questions for Dr. Kirk, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute and just speak up.
I have a personal question that I am somewhat curious about. If you can hear me, Dr. Kirk.
Yep, go ahead.
I was particularly interested in what you said about the 3 Ps for going for a master's slash PhD. I am currently an undergraduate senior entering into a +1 program for my master's at my current college, which is currently in state. I'd say my current project has passion and I have at least enough persistence to go through it. However, I don't have any funding. That being said, I've already committed a considerable amount to it, such that leaving would be a lot. And as is, my justification has always been, I'm doing this 1 year quicker. Any gains I get from getting funding would be smaller, even if I did get them anyways. What is your opinion about no funding BSMS program?
Yeah, okay, so that's a little bit of a special case. The 3+2 programs or the 4+1 programs where you are on a fast track to a master's degree is probably a little bit of a gray area because you're right. What you're doing is you're kind of lumping a master's degree into your bachelor's degree, And almost always, the bachelor's degrees you have to pay for by loans or out of pocket. Then, so I think in your case, I think your thinking is sound in that you've invested a lot. You're on an accelerated track. It's worth an extra year. That being said, if you do decide to go on to PhD, definitely look for the support in science. Unfortunately, in social science or arts, not the case. But in science, definitely look for that funding if you are going ahead in a PhD program.
My major and planned PhD would be aerospace engineering, but definitely understood. Thank you, Dr. Kirk.
Yeah, of course.
I did have another question that was submitted ahead of time, if no one else has anything. The question is, has the speaker utilized ROS2 computer vision PX4 to any degree in their research?
So, computer vision in general, I certainly have been very interested in, specifically image processing and looking at taking medical image processing algorithms and adapting them to solar physics. So for my PhD, actually, I took a program that was used to track cells as they crawled across, moved across a page. Or moved across I should say, a microscope slide. And they would take video recordings and watch how small organisms moved. I used that and adapted it and applied it to the chromosphere of the sun, the middle atmosphere, and was watching how solar eruptions move. And so I was using the same sort of physics principles and adapting it to that. Now it's a little bit easier in a Python environment. You can use those tools a lot more readily. But classical computer vision is still something that I'm interested in with image segmentation, where you cut out a piece or you detect something, and something that I continue to do research on.
I have a question. So I was wondering if you could tell us I'm a big fan of like mysteries, right? So what's your favorite, I guess, science question or, mysterious science topic that you got to work on?
Ooh, okay. So, um, I think I like mysteries that seem deceptively easy, and then they're really complicated. So, the mystery that I've worked on directly has to do with the solar cycle. Okay, so the sun goes through an 11-year cycle where you go from lots of activity, flares, and then to quiet, and then back again. We don't really know why 11 years or exactly how it's formed. It has something to do with internal flows in the interior and the solar dynamo, how magnetic fields are formed, but we really don't know why. The piece that I did research on that I still find really curious is that we have the north part in the more northern hemisphere of the sun evolving at a different speed than the southern hemisphere of the sun. It's weird. The southern hemisphere is lagging behind. It's just evolving like a year or 18 months slower than the north. Why? How can you have halves of a globe moving at different speeds? These are all part of one dynamic system. They all feed off of each other. Yet it's very clear if you look at the magnetic fields and the way they're aligned and how they move and flip, there's this discrepancy. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I've certainly done a lot of research to characterize that, to be able to say this is the reason, this is exactly how they're evolving slower, and these are the pieces that are synced up with each other versus out of sync. And so yeah, that's something I would still love to know the answer to.
I know we're at 4, or I guess 4 Montana time, but I know there was one other question. Jacob Morgan looks like they have their hand up in the room.
Oh, okay. Hi. Hi, Dr. Kirk.
Hello.
So I wanted to ask more about the heliophysics education opportunity, like the HEAT
Yeah.
program. How could like a school or university sort of get involved in that with you guys, or is that at all possible?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a lot of course offerings right now. And so if you We specifically target grades 5 through 14. So first 2 years of undergraduate, that's sort of our sweet spot from 5th grade all the way up to the first 2 years of undergraduate. One of our major partners on the program is the American Association of Physics Teachers. What they do is they do workshops and ambassador programs where you can go in and get training on how to be a space science or heliophysics ambassador, either as I think they accept graduate students or professors or teachers. So like if you're a high school teacher or a graduate student or a professor, you can become a heliophysics ambassador and really go back to your community. Otherwise, NASA HEAT, if you go to science.nasa.gov/learn/HEAT, that's our program webpage, or just Google NASA HEAT, it'll take you there. We have course offerings. So we have material that's aligned to different grade levels. We're always looking for feedback. We're always looking for people to be pilot testers. So if you are doing teaching in the classroom, or if you are working with students in out of school time, we're always interested in people to do pilots of new programs and new efforts that we're trying to do, and give us some feedback, because what we want to do is humanize heliophysics. We're trying to get the idea of anything that has to do with heliophysics and the connection to people and to you. So yeah, it's a great way to be involved. And yeah, take a look at our website and see if there are activities there. If there's other ways you want to get involved, or you have other people that you'd like to get involved, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can direct you further.
Can I get your email?
Yep.
By any chance? Awesome.
I'll put
Thank
it in
you
the
so
chat.
much. Okay.
Mentioning
Thank you.
feedback too, I just wanted to put our speaker series feedback form in the group chat in case anyone has any comments they'd like to share.
So yeah, Dr. Kirk's email is in the chat if you want to reach out to him with any other questions that you have for him, but want to respect everyone's time, and so close out for today and say a big thanks again, Dr. Kirk, for your talk, and thanks everyone for attending, and have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.